Hello, everybody, and welcome to Be My Guest. And my very special guest today, I'll get straight to it, is the well-known, renowned Norah Casey. Norah was a member of. Hello, Norah.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. Norah was a dragon on Dragon's Den here in Ireland, and Norah has of late done a huge, colossal amount of work for women and people in domestic violence situations. She's been on Dancing with the Stars, or Strictly Come Dancing here in Ireland, and she has many, many strings to her bow, not least the fact that her gorgeous house behind you won
Ah,
Celebrity House of the Year. It's fabulous, Norah. Hello,
thank
Norah.
you.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice day. Well, it started sunny up here, so fingers crossed. Yeah,
You're in what part of Dublin?
Ranelagh,
Ranelagh. It's a lovely
leafy
part.
Ranelagh.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yes.
I spend a lot of time though in the Phoenix Park where I grew up, so I had the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it must have been fantastic growing up as a child in the Phoenix Park, having that scenery behind you, and I suppose the Auras, the President's House.
Yeah, I had the
You
best
know,
house.
you had the best house.
I think the funny thing growing up in the park, my grandfather was a ranger and my father, and so we've been there for generations. And we live in a lodge, so there's a number of lodges around the park, and it's kind of a little family all on its own
Yeah,
in the park. Um, you don't really understand how special it is until you go out into the world. Now I look back and think, wow, it was like,
it's idyllic.
having a back garden in the middle of the city. I always say about the Phoenix Park, it's a way of leaving the city without leaving the city. And there was a lot of us, there were 8 of us. My mother says, don't be doing the Angela's Ashes now, 8 of us in a 3-bed lodge. But, there was a lot of us. And my father's OPW wages was the only thing that kind of kept it. My mother was a nurse and went back nursing
Yeah.
after we were reared, kind of. But I just remember idyllic, beautiful summer's days. They would open that door and we would run wild all over the park. And my dad used to ring a bell at dusk, in the people's gardens to get us all to come back home. And
Yeah.
there isn't one part of the park that I don't know everything about, that I haven't played and explored. My dad's job took him all over the park. So we went on bicycles with him like ducks, all over the park to Farmley, Island Bridge, Castleknock, Ashtown.
Mm.
Um, and I look at it now, walking through the park, and I think, wow, anybody would give the right arm to grow up in a beautiful place like this. It's
I
magical.
wonder, was it our childhood? Because I can remember we're the same age, Nora, you and I. And I wonder, was it our childhood that was so good, that we had it so good that we always thought that the sun was shining? Or was it always shining? What is
I
it about? Because I can't remember a bad day.
No, I can't. I think firstly, I would say when there's a strong emotion attached to a memory, it's stored slightly higher up in your brain. So sometimes we remember the summer days because they were probably more fun.
Yeah,
We,
carefree.
when I think now, we used to go on holiday to Portrane, where my uncle lived, and that felt to me like I was going to the Caribbean. So
Yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
would get, we didn't have a car early on in my childhood, so we would get buses and trains and end up in Donabate and get a bus from Donabate out to Portrane, and then we'd be at the seaside and the swinging boats. And all I remember was us running into that sea constantly, all day, every day.
Yeah.
And in my head, it was beautiful, azure, gorgeous, tropical waters. And now I look at it and I think, oh, wild horses wouldn't get me in there to swim.
It's the same with me in Wales, Porthcawl. My father's people were from Wales, and I'd go back regularly, and I had this idyllic view or image of Porthcawl, and again the azure blue sea, and it was far from azure blue when I grew up. Do you know? But do you think that? Do you think that that is why, because your mother was a nurse, that's what compelled you to go down initially down the nursing route?
Maybe there's a long line of nurses in my family. So my aunt, my godmother was a nurse, and I have uncles who are nurses in St. Eda's and
Mm.
Portrane. And so there was a lot of nurses. I think, to be perfectly honest, what inspired me more was getting out of Dublin. which is an odd thing to say because I was only 17
Yeah.
at the time. But I was one of those children who went to school early because my birthday's in August. So I ended up finishing my leaving cert when I was 16. So I had a year to kick around. I was actually raising two baby gorillas in Dublin Zoo,
Oh,
Yinka and Gory.
fabulous.
I worked in Dublin Zoo all my life. It was my second home, and
Wow.
and I was kicking my heels around thinking, will I go to college or my father, like the civil service or the bank? And then suddenly the lovely ranger who run the Parkgate Street lodge, lived in that lodge, his daughter had fallen in love with a Scottish policeman and had gone over there to work in a hospital on the banks of Loch Lomond. And she gave a brochure to my father, who gave it to me, and I phoned up and they were desperate for nurses. And I ended up on the banks of Loch Lomond in Scotland at 17, training to be a nurse. I didn't at the time imagine it was my job for life, but I did really love it. I think within 6 months, apart from the homesickness, which was huge because there was nobody in the west of Scotland that was in any way non-Scottish other than me. All the girls went
Yeah.
home at the weekend. I just remember long weekends from Friday to Sunday night on my own in the nurse's home.
Yeah.
But I loved being a nurse, and I ended up staying in it for 5 years. After I qualified, I did cardiac, and then I went over to Edinburgh to do burns and plastic surgery. Um, and I guess that was the point where I probably realized it wasn't something I wanted to do forever. Firstly, because it's I was always afraid of meeting a burns victim.
Yeah.
This hospital that I trained in the Vale of Leven is very small. You'd end up in running casualty as it was then, on long nights, and road traffic accidents would come in, everything and anything would come in from the Highlands. So I always thought, I don't mind what comes in so long as it's not a burn, it's not somebody from a house fire.
Phobia you
So,
had.
so I confronted the fear by doing a year's program with burns in Edinburgh. And Bangor it's the home of actually the forceps and everything. Bangor is like the home of plastic surgery, not cosmetic surgery, I hasten to add. So we were dealing with very extreme cases, children from house fires, teenagers who'd had multiple operations from fire scarring. And I really felt at the end of it that I didn't want to spend my life doing it. I was 23 at the time. An opportunity came up to work for the Royal College of Nursing in London as an
Yeah.
officer, and I went for 3 or 4 interviews. So that I really still to this day don't know how they employed me, because you were supposed to be 25, and I was as green as get out, as they said themselves. But they did. I did
They
have a
saw
lot of.
something in you.
Yeah, I actually loved nursing so much. I got actually quite political about nursing and about the need for us to move to student status. I was part of the roster on the ward, and I was very active within the Royal College of Nursing as a voluntary member. So, and believe you me, by the time I'd invited people from London headquarters up to the back of nowhere in Loch Lomond, they remembered me. So when I went for the interview,
You're not somebody that they forget very easily anyway,
well,
Norah,
they
I would
also had
say.
to take planes, trains, and automobiles to get to this place. It was so out of the way. But I think I had a lot of knowledge, which a lot of people at 23 might not have had, partly because I had all that extra time at the weekends. I cared passionately about the profession of nursing, still do, still work very closely with them, about the need to kind of develop nurses as independent practitioners. I was always I still am very keen to explore what's uniquely nursing as opposed to medicine. At that
Yeah.
time, people used to say, "Oh, did you not get enough points to be a doctor?" They could never really understand that nursing is
Terrible.
a
It's
quite
terrible.
separate.
Are
Yeah.
you glad? Are you glad that it's changed now from the way you trained as a nurse before
Oh,
to
yeah.
now it being a degree course, a Bachelor of Science
A
degree
hundred
course?
percent. I think there's in the UK they're putting in place a year's kind of a practical placement. The one thing that's missing is the same for all graduates, by the way, even ones that come out with
Yeah.
journalism qualifications, is that they're not. I call it the sheep dip. In the days when the economy was boomier, we could all afford to take in graduates and then spend a year, teaching them how to work on the workplace.
Yeah.
Nurses don't come out of college like other graduates, fully formed and ready to practice on the ward. So they definitely need that extra year, I think, doing placements, and in addition to the placements they do in college, which aren't sufficient,
No.
to try and help them to understand the practicalities. So there's an art and science to nursing, and I guess that the degree level education helps people to understand the science and they get a glimpse of the art, but really it's not until they qualify that they get to understand it more.
That's true. I mean, they're thrown into the big bad world without any practical experience, any great practical experience.
Yes.
And yeah, but working in the workplace for about a year, at least a year or two, would give them that
Yeah.
once they're qualified. But what was it in you as a person that you decided to take the journalistic route?
Route. I
Yeah.
was, so you have to remember, I
This
was
is a
20,
completely different area,
yeah, very different.
but still you were a curious person.
And there's
So,
journalism in my family too. I guess
yeah,
the two aspects of my life would be journalism and nursing. I was 23 in London working for the Royal College of Nursing, which had a very twin set and pearls image at the time. And I
yeah,
was the youngest thing to ever work in the headquarters. I was looking after the student nurses. There were about 60,000 of them at the time. And they wanted to change their image. They had a very bright, since deceased general secretary called Trevor Clay. And he said, you know, why don't we use Norah in our media profile? So they took me off and trained me to within an inch of my life. I remember doing 2 weeks with somebody videoing me and playing it back and critiquing me every evening. I did, you know, public speaking. I started, so that through a whole series of what do you call it, like glossing you up for 2 years. You know, I have a very natural Irish accent anyway. It's never
yeah.
had much inflection. Um, but I think all of that rigor, and I was writing, I was doing the news in the evening, I was, you know, regularly appearing on the BBC and ITV. And I had a great mentor who was a man at the time. He was another man who was a nurse, and he was my boss. And he sat me down one day and said, "Here you are now. What are you going to do with your life? Because you're not going back to nursing." By then I was, you know, so used to doing other things, and you can't stay in this job forever. You're looking after student nurses, so there's an inevitability that you don't want to do that forever. Why don't you think of journalism? And so he nudged me in that direction. It was a big decision because I had to go right back to the
That,
bottom again.
yeah.
You know, I had achieved a certain status. I was driving a car, the company car. I had an office, I had a secretary. I was, you know, earning, I think about 10,000, which was a fortune at the time. And
Yeah.
suddenly I was right back to like 2 grand graduate. I did my journalism training in Harlow. There were 4 centres for the National
Near
Council for
where
the
I was
Training of
born,
Journalists.
in Wembley.
Yeah, yeah. I like Harlow. So I did my graduate, they accepted my nursing qualifications as a graduate level, and I did the postgrad program and, you know, served my time doing news reporting and births, deaths, and marriages, and all of the usual stuff you get to do in the early days, court reporting.
Cracks on the roads.
And then I very cleverly matched the 2 qualifications. Very few people were qualified in nursing and journalism, and I went back to work for a nursing publication first called Nursing Standard, and then eventually I started to run a separate business. You know, I'd say very few people know this, but my real claim to fame is I published peer-reviewed journals during that period, including evidence-based practice with the British Medical Journal with Richard
Oh,
Smith. I
okay.
co-edited that. People always say,
That
"What's your
must have been
claim to fame?"
interesting.
Well, you know, we worked with the Cochrane Centre in the University of York, and David Sacker, who was at that time the foremost expert in evidence base in Oxford and the University of Toronto. So there are the 3 top centres in the world that were trying to achieve, you know, the holy grail of doctors having to read 14 miles high of the Lancet and the BMJ and the New England Journal of Medicine, not being sustainable if we wanted them to stay current in their practice. So in a way, we did all the hard work so they didn't have to. But the irony is we employed about 130 reviewers, researchers and reviewers in Toronto. They were the center for the review, and we started to review and peer critique all of the English speaking research in the medical field and medical and associated practice fields. And we were only interested in those gems that tipped practice over the edge in terms of a change. So a lot of researchers, you know, just builds up into more research and the need for more research and the replication. So every now and again, this gem will come along that will signal a change to insulin, for instance. I just remember that because it was in the first issue. And so we did all the thorough background work. And then the first issue, we were funded partly by the BMA and other organizations. I think they put millions in. and we only had 16 pages after a year and a half. And I remember the Department of Health coming along saying, is this a joke? Like, we're at the launch party and myself and Richard Smith were making these speeches about how we'd just broken the mold and that the world is never going to be the same again. And he was picking up this flimsy thing saying, is this what our millions had bought? And we were trying to explain, but underneath that, there's the solidity of people, in the professions, understanding that if they read that one-page summary, which tells them about the research and the change, and then there was always an expert consultant review at the bottom. So I remember particularly the diabetes one because it was a huge issue for the World Health Organization, and this one piece of research did actually signal a change to insulin therapy. And one of the foremost European experts in diabetes wrote the little review at the bottom. But in the space of about 5 minutes, somebody working in that area could read that and would be current and up to date in their practice and know that the back end of that was really scientifically proven and secure, rather than it's quite spurious at the moment, as to whether in the midst of COVID, we've had nothing but non-peer reviewed speculative pieces described as research. So
Absolutely, absolutely, Norah, absolutely.
yeah. And
And
I
you
think
know,
that rigor, sorry, Mary, stayed with me for my life. I was doing my own PhD at Wales at the time in the University of Cardiff. And I've always in my life looked to science whenever there's an issue or a problem, no matter what has hit me in my life. I delve into the research, the science, and try to
yeah,
make
you're the
sense that way.
scientific brain.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and an analytical brain.
Yeah.
You try to analyze everything. Do you think that that is what stood to you when you? I would have always thought I had a creative brain because my primary degree was art and design in the Limerick College of Art and Design, and then I went into literature, which isn't. It's all the creative side as
Yeah.
well. But yet I love science, and I loved biology in school and that, and I do love science. But do you think that that analytical brain has carried you into your business? Because you've gone on and you've written books, and you've founded businesses, and you've become a huge philanthropist. You're still recognised as our greatest philanthropist in this country,
Thank you.
and I mean you were with Dragon's Den for quite a number of years, and and you've also written books.
Now I
Do
feel
you
about
think that
90, Mary.
yeah, I know, but you packed so much into such a young life.
I think I personally am also somebody who's half art, half science,
Yeah,
because you have to remember that even during that period of my life where I was disciplined in that peer critique, I established probably blind peer review systems in the UK. I was studying with Smith and Nephew in the US to bring in continuing education across the profession. So there was one part of my life that was very much about that very big discipline. And then I was also presenting a program for the BBC in the evening called The Learning Zone. I was working at LBC on my own show which is it's a radio station in London on
yeah,
Sunday.
I know, I know it.
I did a show with another, it was called Viva, and it was then bought by the man who owns Harrods. Can't remember his name now, but
Uh,
Fayad.
Al Fayed.
Yeah, Fayad.
Yeah, yeah.
Dodi
Dodi
Fayad's
Al
father.
Fayed's father. Yeah.
So he bought it over, and it was a women-only station, and then he bought it over, and it wasn't anymore. And so I was a lot of my spare time was being spent doing very creative things, while I was very disciplined in the day job. I think when I was about 28, so still very young, I was editorial director of this a company, very big company, we had a book publishing division, we had a huge conference division, we had a huge periodical division, and I really was getting a kick more out of launching, acquiring, merging, and realized that probably my destination was more as a CEO than it was in the creative side of the business. So they eventually appointed me CEO before I was 30 and realized I was a terrible one. I wanted to be friends with everybody. I wasn't going to make any decisions without consulting 50,000 people. And so I went to Ashridge Management College and I studied strategic management, which really saved me. It's kind of a 2-year program where you're
Yeah.
locked in for weeks at a time and you have your own mentor. I actually went back then in, a few years later and did advanced strategic management. I'm still a lifelong alumni member of Ashridge. It's definitely my management home, and I actually helped them to develop their women in leadership program after that.
Yeah,
It's in Berkhamsted. It's out in one of those leafy, beautiful suburbs in the north west of London. It's gorgeous. So I think that the one thing I learned during all of that period was education was the most important thing to me. Every single time I wanted to switch career or I wanted to take on something new, I went back and studied.
that's a bit like what I am, only I don't.
Yeah,
I'll admit I haven't done an eighth of what you've done, Nora. I mean, I feel inadequate, quite frankly. And I thought I'd done a lot because, I mean, I think life is a continuous learning process,
yeah.
and I'm a
Uh,
great believer in lifelong learning and people
Me
going
too.
back and not stopping. And people say, "Oh God, when are you going to stop studying?"
I know.
Probably never, because I
Yeah,
like I like the challenge of
yeah. And also, you have to remember, I didn't have a normal decade in my 20s. So they
we're going
call
to
it
talk about.
in marketing terms, it's called the decade of indulgence. In Ireland, it's 23 to 33. It's slightly later than other places. So the end of full-time study and the start of your wonderful decade of looking after yourself. And then at around 33, we usually settle down with a career or, man, woman, partner, mortgage, responsibilities. And during that decade, it really is supposed to be all about you. You're traveling the world, you're spending on yourself, you don't care about any responsibilities. But I was actually married very young in my 20s,
Yeah,
and it wasn't a good marriage. And
no,
because of that, I compensated hugely by working like a Trojan and
I think that's
studying.
what we do. We do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And I do in a way, for all the negatives of that period in my life, I would never have achieved anything like what I've achieved if I didn't have that time where I was trying to eat it up with other things. I would try to stay out of the house as long as possible. I was
Yeah,
always locked into my office studying something, or I had to go to
yeah,
Wales
that's
to do.
exactly it. You're dead right.
Yeah, I do look back on that, outside of the difficulties of the marriage. I look back at that and I think, how was I doing an MPhil at the University of Wales? And I did 2 years at Ealing College studying TV production. I mean, how on earth did I do all of that? But the reality is I didn't have a good personal life, a good
Yeah,
social life.
yeah, yeah. We
So
all we all compensate. We find things
yeah,
to clutter our lives with, to
yeah,
to face the reality of
yeah.
of um of our lives. But tell me a little bit, if you don't mind, Nora, about that time in your in
My
your in
life.
your life.
I think, for one thing, I was coming out of nursing, and what I know now is that sometimes people who have an empathetic nature are often a target for people who consciously or unconsciously want to control you. And I was very isolated from my family. I had moved from Scotland down to London, so I was all alone. I was living with a friend's elderly relative in Hammersmith, and he was much older than me. He was in his 40s, and he was a very successful business person, very wealthy and very sophisticated. I was none of those things. And
Yeah,
when I met him first, I was kind of surprised how quickly the relationship developed. I'd only really had casual relationships up until then, and I think very soon after that he was kind of offering me gifts, telling me how much he loved
yeah,
me,
yeah, yeah.
that he couldn't live without me, and that I was everything to him, and I was his princess. And it's really
It's
weird through the
fantastic, isn't
through
it,
the
when you hear
lens of
that?
time. Yeah, through the lens of time, I've sat with women the same as me, and they all say the same. And I'm like, how was I so dumb that I didn't see that?
No,
But of
yeah,
course, you
yeah,
don't in your early 20s. I thought all the time, somebody who loves me this much couldn't possibly want to harm me. And I would love to say to the world that I got trapped in a marriage that ended up being abusive. But actually, he was abusive before we got married.
yeah,
I think only a couple of years into the relationship, he was always telling me he wanted to take me around the world. Now, at this point, I was living with him. He only drove Porsches. I'm giving you a hint of the lifestyle here. His day job was a Range Rover, and his evening was Porsches. And I was being introduced to, like a little Eliza Doolittle type of scenario for me, learning how to, use cutlery and be sophisticated and drink wine. I don't think I'd ever drank wine in my life until I met him. And And then he was taking me around the world, which was amazing. And we'd gone out for dinner the night before, all the bags were packed, and we were coming up the driveway of the house. And I said something that must have annoyed him. I still don't know what it was, but I do remember him slamming the steering wheel, and he screeched the car to a stop. And he got out his side of the car, slammed the door, and I was like, oh, what did I say? What did I do?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he opened my side of the door, and I got out thinking he was going to help me out or something, and he just grabbed my head and slammed it off the top of the Porsche, like really slammed it very, very hard. It was one of those jolts where you're not quite sure what has happened. And I'm still standing next to the open door of the car, and he casually opened the front door, went in, and went up to bed. And I was stunned and went inside, and my head was really sore, banging, you know, my ear was beginning to swell up, and I was sitting in the front room thinking, what the hell? How did that happen?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable that somebody did that to me. And there was all these confused emotions about, Jesus, you can't possibly stay in this house with somebody who would do that to you.
And it's amazing how you do stay with somebody like that.
Yeah, then the next moment I'm thinking, what did I say that made him do that? And before I'm finished, you know, my 2 or 3 hours of staring into space, I've already decided what kind of makeup I might put on to hide all the bruising that had come up all down the side of my face. And the next morning, we got up silently, didn't speak, went to the Heathrow, and it wasn't until we were up in the air and we were sitting an aisle apart from one another in business, and he reached out and he started to touch the side of my face that was full of bruises, and he was crying. And he started to profess his, you know, regret, and that it was all about his stress levels and the coming up to leaving for a big round the world trip, and he couldn't believe he'd done that to me and he'd never do it again. And you know, I at the time was feeling, what am I doing sitting on this plane? I'm now trapped with this man who did this to me, but at the same time, anybody who takes me around the world is bound to love me, and you know, he's not going to harm me. So this was like
Yeah.
music to my
Control though.
ears.
It was a control
Yeah, I think I
power.
welcomed him saying all of that because I believed it. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, I didn't know then that if somebody slaps you once, they're never going to stop. I I just believed that he was contrite and it was an aberration and it was never going to happen again. And you know, that should have been my warning call. And that's really why I try and fundraise for young people to recognize a toxic relationship, because I didn't. And I spent a long time. I was 9 years with him, and during that time, there were some very violent moments. I've spoken about it. I can't go back there now, Mary, if you don't mind.
No,
But
that's okay.
I still have all of the scars and, you know, ribs that have healed. In fact, he broke bones here on the side of my face. And the irony is, every time I'm at my happiest and I smile, it doesn't quite go up. So I kind of feel,
Reminder.
yes, when you're smiling, that I remember the fact that he punched me, and that's why I can't smile properly, you know. So I'm quite self-conscious when people say, give us a big grin, and I don't want to, because this is broken here. So I think that like most people, I tried many times. I think probably about 2 years out from when I finally left him, I had decided I needed to leave after a very violent incident. And every time I tried to raise it, he threatened to take his own life. He would go into a fit of rage. He'd throw my clothes out the windows. Then he'd beg forgiveness. Then he'd cry. Then he'd say he'd go to some counseling, some psychotherapist, that he didn't mean to do it and that it was me that drove
Mm.
him to it. It was all
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
confused. and and there was a huge part of me that knew that I didn't have any financial standing to leave. I had gone into him. I was in digs, let's say, with this
when you met
with my
him.
friend's elderly aunt, and I had no savings, nothing. Geez, you don't come out of nursing with savings, I can assure you, and then go into journalism. So I had none of my own money. He even had my passport. I had no rights to ownership of anything in the house. I did actually in the end, but I didn't know I had. I had nothing, and I just knew I'm isolated from my family. I'm in London. If I leave him, what the hell am I going to do? Where am I going to live?
But
You know?
that's what actually, that's the hold that they have over
Yeah,
people. What do you
yeah,
do? How do you get out of it? What's your life going to be without them?
yeah.
Bad as
I'll
it
tell
is
you
with
the
them.
the one thing that, you know, I know I went on to a TED talk and everything, and I'm still not finished writing about it. But you know, all the people who, and I had people saying it to me, what the hell were you doing staying in that relationship? They kind of don't really understand that
You'll never
complex.
understand.
It's a very complex arrangement when you love somebody, and it's all bound up in this coercive control. Um, and I think what changed. See, yeah, the most important thing, which I named my TED talk, is how did you leave, not why did you stay, you know. Um, I'm 2 years trying to leave him. I'm telling you, on Friday nights, I would come home from work, and I worked up in Harrow. It was a long journey
Yeah.
down to Wimbledon. And all the way down, I would promise myself, this weekend I'm leaving him. This weekend I'm going to tell him. This weekend I'm going to leave him. And I would drive all the way into work on Monday morning crying, saying, why didn't I do it? How could I not have had the strength to do it? Then I went home this weekend without him, which was, you know, a difficulty. I mean, I'd only arrived in the house in Dublin and he'd have sent a bouquet of flowers on ahead. My father thought he was the loveliest man. Landed on your feet. He would shower me with gifts, and the more abusive he was, the more gifts I got. So I
Yeah.
went home on my own. It was a family event, and I was out with my mum, and she said to me, "Is there something going on?" You
Mother's
know,
instinct.
yeah. And I told her everything, and because I told her everything, I knew I had to leave him.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly
I
that.
can't describe why that is. I had never
No,
told anybody.
I
I'd
understand
never,
that
not
perfectly.
not even, you know, up until that moment, I had told nobody, not even my sisters. And after a very violent incident, I had a sister who was around me at the time, and I had black eyes, blue eyes, I had swellings, I had ribs broken, and she kept saying, "What happened to you?" And I said, "I fell down the stairs." But then I remembered I told people in work I was in a car accident, like, and all my lies are kind of flying around my head at the time. So here I am, just having told my mum, and her saying, "You have to leave him."
There's no going back then.
And I went, and that Friday, not even waiting until I was driving home, that Friday morning, I woke up at about 5 o'clock, had a shower, packed a small bag, and I woke him up, and I had a speech prepared. I'll never forget it, like the black humor about it now. I had this speech prepared as to why I was leaving him. So I wake him up, and I'm telling him that I've, you know, put up with, you know, one too many punches and blows and the abuse and everything else, and that I need to leave. And I can hear him gently snoring while I'm only 5 minutes into the speech. Like, he was like looking at me saying, "What are you going on about? You know, go back to bed." And then he just fell asleep 5 minutes into my little speech. So, but I remember getting into the car,
You got to say it anyway, Nora. You,
and I
you got
drove
to
away.
articulate the words.
Yeah, it was like driving off a cliff. I can't describe it. I drove away from that house with that little bag, not knowing where I was going to live. I actually ended up in an ibis at Heathrow because it was the cheapest place I could find, and it was near Harrow where I worked. I obviously hadn't told anybody at work, and I phoned my sister, my younger sister, and I talked to her. She couldn't believe it. And I just kept saying, "I've left him, I've left him." And she talked me off the ledge really for the 20 minutes it took me to go into work, because I had to face work. You
Yeah,
know, it
yeah.
was unheard of in those days to go in and say to somebody, "Sorry, my husband's abusive, can I have a day off because I've just left my home?"
That was probably
Um,
the best thing that it gave you. It actually
yeah,
gave you the normality.
exactly. And I think then, having left him, he, of course, went into a very difficult period of threatening to take his own life and doing all sorts of very dramatic things to try and get me back. And at that point, my biggest fear was I would go back. Like, I was sitting on the floor of a hotel in Ibis in Heathrow, listening to, you know, families and kids going off on the best vacation of their lives, and my whole life was wrecked. I didn't know where I was going to live the next night or the night after that, and everything in me was saying, "Jesus, don't crack, don't go back,"
Yeah,
because, you know, I
yeah.
know there's a wardrobe full of my beautiful clothes in that house, and there's a bed, and there's an office, and my computer's there, and in a nanosecond I could get in the car and go back, and he'd forgive me, and we'd all be. So I stayed away. I had some really, really, you know, people that were unlikely friends at the time. My finance director at work, who we ended up being good friends, he he organized for his brother to let me sleep in a couch in the sitting room. I had a really good nursing friend in Northern Ireland who eventually ended up helping me to get an apartment, which was owned by a surgeon in Northern Ireland. Still know that family, and he was working a couple of days in London every week, but he didn't really need it. He said he could go over and back in the one day, and he let me stay. So you do realize that, you know,
Who
people are,
people, the quality
yeah,
of people.
and I'm not sure. I didn't really, you know, obviously my friend who's the nurse in Northern Ireland was very close to me. And after I left Peter, I told her. And, you know, there was a small group of people who were like supporting me through it all. And I did stay away, which is great.
That it's amazing how once you know once you actually tell somebody that it's that actual one moment that when
Yeah.
you tell somebody that you can't go. That's the breaking point, I think, for most people in a situation. I suppose speaking
And
from
Mary,
experience. Yeah,
it's the first time you've admitted it to yourself.
yourself. Yeah.
You know, I was killed saying to myself, sure, you know,
But
we're
you feel
great
it's a betrayal
friends.
of them as well. You
Mm,
feel it's a betrayal of them to tell
yeah,
anyone. So when you finally do tell somebody, you feel, well, I finally betrayed them. I can't,
yeah. There's no
there's
going
no going
back.
back now.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, I definitely think there's something in that. There's not a huge amount of research in how people leave abusive relationships. It's something I'd love to do more about.
Yeah.
Talking to women, I can see so many similarities
Mm.
between us. And if we could find that, you know, in a way, I think the difficulty at the moment is we do, me included, spend all our time raising the profile, encouraging women to come forward, getting them to phone, the bystander campaign, and
And you're global ambassador for Vital Voices. Is that
yes,
very
that's
much?
not in. No, that's more in. So Vital Voices, I've been working with for a few years, and I'm on the European board. And as you say, I'm an ambassador, a global ambassador,
That was founded
um,
by Hillary Clinton, was
and
it?
Madeleine
And
Albright,
Madeleine Albright.
and it was set up initially to support women after the Beijing conference for women.
Mm.
So you know, it's a hugely successful organization globally, and its purpose in life is to support women in, particularly in developing countries, but increasingly in developed countries too. And it doesn't support organizations. It'll find that one woman in society that can make a change, and they will do everything to train her, support her, educate her, financially help her. And their hope is, you know, it could be a woman who's standing for election every year, which there is actually in one of the countries, a woman in her own community who's setting up some fantastic charitable. So it's a woman we support rather than an organization. My own
Fabulous.
role is on economic empowerment for women. So I think over time they realized that although it's really important to get women into public life and into the voluntary sector, um, and to support them in their charitable works, it's equally important that women should be economically empowered, in all kinds of environments, as much in Ireland as it is in Africa and in India. So I took on some women around the world. At the moment, I mentor a fabulous woman in Delhi who runs An Hotel. If anyone ever
Mm.
goes to India, go and stay with
And
Shilpi
you
Singh's
were
company.
nominated as Woman of the Century there, or Woman of the Decade
Yeah,
there.
and that was through another group. I do a lot of webinars in India. Believe it or not, there's a phenomenal number of women involved in business in India, and some of that's family orientated. So the Women's Economic Forum were having their big event in Delhi, and they asked me to go over and pick up the Woman of the Decade. I don't think I've ever had a Woman of the Decade award. My brother said,
Woman of
"What
the
were you doing for
Decade.
the other decade?" I
But
mean,
Nora,
really?
Nora, look how life has changed. And out of adversity, if you like, you were brought up, you were spoiled really when you were brought up. I mean, you had two parents who loved you,
Hmm.
and you had a great, idyllic, some would say, childhood. We all had, even though, I mean, I only, my mum was here with me when my dad couldn't get a job here in Ireland because he wasn't Irish, and there was only mum and I. But I thought we were loaded because Dad would come like a Greek bearing gifts once a year, with everything from my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, and my mother would knit everything I ever wore, and I thought we were loaded. We didn't even have a car, but we had love.
Yeah,
And you were the same, Nora. And then suddenly you're thrust into a relationship that you just can't see a way
yeah,
out of, and then
yeah.
suddenly you become Nora Casey.
I think driving away from that house that day, I promised myself I would stand on my own 2 feet for the rest of my life, that I would never rely on anybody else financially or otherwise. And it gave me, you know, I think taking that step, which was a huge risk for me, it actually gave me, the confidence came later, but it definitely gave me that steel inside myself that I wanted to do something different. I was not a hugely confident child. I wouldn't have been the first one with my hand up in the class. I think anybody who's super confident doesn't end up in nursing. That's the truth. I mean, I love nurses and I love nursing, but it's not, you don't go into nursing to be ambitious and to rise high and to be a great leader. You go into nursing because you love helping people, you know. I think leaving that relationship, left me with a core of metal inside me that made me who I am now. And I, somebody recently asked me to talk about the day that changed my life.
Yeah.
And they thought it was Richard's death, or, you know, maybe my marriage or the birth of Dara. But actually, it was that day, because I would never have met Richard. I would never have had Dara. I would never have launched my own businesses. I wouldn't be anything without having taken that first step to leave that relationship. So out of something which was a great deal of adversity, excuse me, sorry, mate, and a huge, I think, a huge personal journey in terms of learning. We all learn from failure, and it's as much to do with the failure in your personal life as it is not. It wasn't my failure, but you know, it's the same kind of thing, that you learn all of these things that you don't really understand at the time. But when I left, I just know that nothing was going to stop me. I
Yeah.
felt that
Yeah.
I could do anything. After I'd been through all of that, I just felt I need to do whatever I want to do in this life and do it myself, you know, and not
You're
lean on
making up
anyone
for the
else.
9 years, the
Yeah,
9 years of control. You've taken
yeah.
back your control, and
I was
you
very
know
driven.
it's a yeah. And I think the older I got, the more driven I've got. I
Yeah.
and I think for much the same reasons. You go through the same. We've been through more or less the same situation. But what was I going to say to you, Nora? Harmonia and spark. I've noticed your lovely book on the back here. Do you see the backdrops here?
I
I've
do. I
put
love that.
spark and harmonia. The
Yeah.
other way around, spark and harmonia. Tell me about those.
The book came about.
That-
So when Richard died, I wouldn't have
That's
said
your
I was.
second husband, Richard,
Yes, I
and
think of him as my only husband, because
only
he's the only one I
husband.
married in a church. And I
He was
really
lovely,
felt I airbrushed the other one out of my mind completely. But Richard was the love of my life. Yeah, amazing man. I
lovely.
think you get the really terrible one, and then I would never have dated. I would never have put myself out there to meet a man again, ever, not as long as I lived. But Richard was working for the BBC at the time, and we were doing a lot of joint work together. In fact, very few people remember this, but there was a nurse in the UK called Beverly Allett. She was convicted of
Oh,
murdering a lot
that's
of
right.
children.
Yes,
Yeah, and it
yes,
was by
yes, yes.
Munchausen's by proxy.
Proxy, yeah,
And I was in one studio discussing that because of my journalism and nursing qualifications, and she was a nurse. She was in Manchester, I think. And Richard was the health correspondent and was in the other studio. So I didn't meet him, but we were talking on this program. And that evening, there was a media dinner, and I found myself sitting next to him. And he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Norah Case." He said, "Oh my God, we were just talking on, the 1 o'clock news together." I said, "Yeah, yeah." So we met, and we were actually doing some joint work with the BBC, not in a relationship, but we were good friends. I'd say just for that year before I left. I left Peter, and we eventually reconnected months after I'd left Peter, and started having coffee, and inevitably we you know we hit it off. I think because we knew each other quite well, the relationship kind of developed quite quickly into, I just knew. I don't know
you
whether
knew
people.
instinctively.
I knew. I mean, he was the one that gave me butterflies. I mean, I was in a constant state of fluttering when I was waiting to meet him, or and I see his face, or he'd come in the door, and it was a totally different experience to, I haven't had a huge amount, sorry, of relationships in my life, to be honest with you. So I just kind of, Peter was my first and Richard was my second. So I didn't have a lot of experience, but I knew this was very different. I was really smitten, and he was too. We were pretty much inseparable very quickly.
And you were married for how long were you married?
Oh God. I'd say so. Dara was born the year after.
Yeah.
We got married on New Year's Eve, and then we had one New Year with no baby, and the following New Year a baby. So that was 2 years, and then he died when Dara was just turning 13. So yeah, 15,
That
15
was
years.
so
Oh, yeah,
sad.
so yeah.
He died of cancer, didn't he?
Yeah, very, very progressive and aggressive, and not diagnosed till quite late. So he was 49, and he was very, I would describe Richard as quite fit and healthy. We'd
Yeah.
just been on a 6-month trip to Australia, New Zealand, all over Asia. And he had had a couple of episodes of, don't really think it's distasteful, but blood in his urine, and we thought it was a kidney stone. So he'd been checked out a few times in various hospitals in Sydney and places. And when he came back, he was checked out in a couple of hospitals here, all clear, no problem. But then a year later, on the eve of his birthday, they diagnosed a tumor in the wet lining of his kidney. So like a bladder tumor, but in his kidney. And they thought that's all there was, and they would whip out the kidney and do a bit of chemo. But we moved Richard's care to an amazing man in James's hospital. I've always felt you need to be in public hospitals if you've got cancer. Their cancer regional centres are really important. And they did a PET scan, and they discovered that at that point, we'd just been diagnosed a week or two. He had cancer in his spine and 3 in his liver. And they decided that to start with, before they started chemo, that they would do some radiotherapy on his spine. And we went to Luke's, which isn't too far from me here.
Yeah, I know it.
But while they were doing the radiotherapy, the tumor in his spine shifted, and it cracked his spinal cord, his spinal column. And then he was on an emergency list for the Mater Hospital to have spinal surgery. But I think the difficulty was that his cancer was too progressed then to open him up. So he was in a wheelchair. Within 4 or 5 weeks of diagnosis, Richard was in a wheelchair and quite sick. And they were no longer talking about treatment. They were more talking about, what they would do to try and give him a little bit longer in life. Yeah. It wasn't palliative. No, they were all out for this very aggressive, toxic kind of chemotherapy combination that they were going to do on him and James's. But after long months of, most days he was too unwell to get the chemotherapy, and he didn't want to stay in hospital. So we would start very early, 5, 6 every morning, go over to James's, and we'd have long days sitting on chairs. And it wasn't the most glamorous now. Most of the time I was sitting on a stool and he was sitting on a hard chair, and we'd wait for blood results. We'd go for coffee, we'd come back, we'd hear whether we could have chemo. Sometimes we didn't come home till 10, 11 o'clock at night because they were waiting for his bloods to get better for him
It's
to have
terrific,
chemo.
isn't it, watching somebody you love dying,
Indescribable.
trying to fight. I watched my mum the same way. Just after my dad died, she was diagnosed. It was there for 3 years, but it wasn't diagnosed. It was, but they forgot to make an appointment with her until it was too late. So you watch the person you love just
I know.
Die in front of you
I know.
gradually.
It's indescribable. I would say, of all the things that I was worried about, Richard's death was really beautiful. He did end up in Blackrock in the hospice. And he really only went in there to get he had a lot of bone cancer at the time in his ribs, and they discovered cancer in his lungs, and they couldn't get his pain under control. And James has said, look, we're not experts really in palliative care, so go and see this guy, Paul Gregan is his name, in Blackrock. He's chair of the Palliative Society. He's brilliant. So we only went out there really to get his pain under control. He had a lot of difficult symptoms, and they said, come in for a few days, sure, we'll look at all your drugs and we'll change all your drugs. But he never came out. He got pneumonia. He was dead within the 2 weeks of going in there. But it was a very beautiful place for him to be. I can't describe how beautiful and peaceful
You've
it
been
was.
very unlucky you've been as successful as you've been in business and in your career and everything. You've had quite tragedies in your private life, but yet you've had, a beautiful marriage that you
I'm grateful.
I
would only say that, of course, when somebody you love very, very much dies, you go through a very difficult time, and I did. But through time and, looking back, I'm so grateful I had that, because I now recognize that not everybody gets to find the love of their life. Not everybody gets to be with somebody who they truly feel is, their soulmate. And, a lot of people are skeptical about that. And, I'm not sort of saying it's for everybody, but for me, I felt, we never had an argument in our lives ever. We were just always so
united.
wonderful. Yeah. And still devoted to each other. I loved his company more than anyone else's.
You're on the same page.
Yeah.
But Norah, tell me about your book, Spark.
Spark was, so I think you know by now that my default position when things are difficult is to work. So I left the company wasn't really where I needed to be at the time. I think if you're running a busy media company, you need to be all in. I didn't really want to be the life and soul of the boardroom. I didn't want to be initiating great ideas. I, in fact, didn't want anybody near me. It was enough to get up every day and try and get Dara to school. Um, and in fact, a lot of the people at work were very grief stricken because they loved Richard. And, I found myself going in there and picking up the computer, and there would be threads there of emails Richard had sent to me, and it was a constant presence. His office was near me, and I just said, it's not for me. I'm going to leave it for a while. My brother ended up running that for me for a while. I'm back running it again, but he did. He was great. And I went off to Wicklow to walk in the forest. I think there was always a view that you should spend a little bit of time with yourself. I can tell you for nothing that I was not good company for myself, and it
But you
wasn't
went
the
back
right
to
thing
your
to do.
childhood. You went back to the woods.
Yeah, and
Isn't
Dara and
that
I
amazing?
kind of in that new word cocooning, we were definitely cocooning down in the forest and walking through the streams and talking about it. It just rained. I remember it raining incessantly all day, every day, and all the different conversations about rain, because nobody could really talk to you about the fact that you just had a tragedy. So there'd be like the rain and the quality of the rain and the type of rain. And so out of the blue, then I had been doing a lot of, maybe not since my 20s. I had been presenting in my 20s, but obviously when I came back to Ireland, nobody knew that, and they'd use me as an expert commentary on lots of different programs. And then Vincent Brown went on holiday, and TV3 called me and said, Vincent Brown's going on holiday. We're trying out some unusual people to host the show. Would you do a couple of nights for us? And I said yes. Now, not even thinking, because at the time I could hardly string a whole sentence together.
Yeah.
I did not want to talk to anyone. I couldn't even have a conversation with my mum, who's closest to me than almost anybody. And I'm down in Wicklow, looking at the sky all the time. And I've just agreed to go on national television.
RTE.
So I know it was TV3 at the time, but
TV3.
I drove up there and looked at the building. It was that like moment of, parking the car and saying, oh my God, what are you doing here? And we were hours before the show. It was on the fiscal treaty. I know Pat Rabbit was on. There was lots of heavy hitters, and it was a very, very, I love all that stuff, by the way. So, and there I was in the boardroom, and lovely producer who I know since said, here's all your research, a big pile, high of research to read for that evening. And can I get you a cup of tea? And, she was really polite and nice. And I said, no, I'm great, I'm great. And then I got up and threw up in the bathroom, and with the stress
It's
in
like
it.
something I do. That's like something I was doing nearly before this interview. I,
I was
I was just
Well,
so
here, nature's
nervous.
sister. And I was then sitting trying to plow through this huge mile of stuff I was supposed to be reading. And every sentence would slither out of my brain as soon as I read it. So I was kept reading the same paragraph over and over. And she would come in and say, how are you doing? And I would just lift a big bunch off the top and put it down and say, great, I finished that bit. I didn't finish it at all. I was,
And
I
Nora, what
was,
did you take on yourself?
but I did throw up a lot that afternoon. So now we're in studio, and I have the thing in my ear, the earpiece in my ear, and the auto cue, and the floor manager counting down. And I had the biggest stress rash, which sort of started here, went all down, bright red stress rash, no saliva, all the usual. And I'm looking at this panel thinking, how am I going to even ask them a question? I can't remember a thing in my head. I don't know what happened. By the time the music started and the opening credits,
The
I
performer took over.
started reading the auto cue, got into it. I don't even remember. It was like a blur. And then the floor manager saying 5 minutes to wrap, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and we were finished. And I was energized beyond energized. I was
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
leaping out of the chair with all of this adrenaline and energy and everything. And I was on the way home to my mother, and I couldn't stop talking. And did you see this? And you see that? And she's going, oh my God, she said, you haven't said a sentence in months. And look, listen to you. And I realized then that if your personal life is in a wreck, as it was, that you could get some really great energy out of doing something different. I've never felt
Pushing
more
yourself
nervous
beyond where
since.
you could
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
I was absolutely terrified. And there's a thing about being absolutely terrified that's really good for your brain. It kind of releases all this dopamine and everything. So the thing that you can't get by lying on the sofa, watching Netflix, I was just getting in droves by sitting in this studio. And I just got an addiction to it. I
Who
was
would
back
have
then.
thought that Vincent Brown would have been the reason
Exactly. I was
for
like,
your
I went back the
dopamine
next.
injection?
And I'm back the next night and I flew through it. Then News Talk were looking for a replacement of Ivan Yates for a year. He was going off to Wales. So I tried out for that and then I got that job and that was breakfast with Chris Donahue. So we were up at 4:30 every morning, broadcast from 7 till 10. And in the middle of all of this, RTE said, would you like to be tried out for this afternoon show we're doing, which is the Today Show that Maura and I do? And I said, well, look, I can't do 5 days a week because I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning. By the way, I was still did one season of Dragon's Den, and I'd committed to doing 13 episodes of something called The Takeover, which
Yeah.
was a great series on RTE,
Mm.
RTE2. So they said, well, why don't you think about doing just Friday? So we're going to do a kind of a, loose women thing on Friday, and Blondy Coffee did it with me, and she went down on Thursday. Honestly, did the legwork, by the way, and I stumbled out of News Talk at 10:30, and I had a taxi driver who was out of work who drove my car for me because it was cheaper anyway for RTE to pay for him to drive me down, and I slept. There was duvet and cushions in the back cover seat, and I slept
Fabulous.
all the way to Cork, and then I'd wake up and this wonderful makeup artist Georgina used to say to me, do you want more lashes, Norah? I'd say, I'd love more lashes. I spent all week talking about politics and the economy, and give me more lashes now so I can go on this show. But it was, I had a moment to myself. It suited me a lot because I was up hugely early in the morning, but I was there for Dara every evening. We spent in the evening time, we did a news conference. It's about 6:15, and I had my homework for the night. In other words, who I was interviewing the next day. So Darren and I did our homework together. We were both in bed at 9:30. I was up and out the door. The great housekeeper who came in, and his lunch. I left all his lunch and everything in his uniform. She used to sort him out, and he'd cycle to school. And I was there as soon as he came in the evening or pick him up. So it worked very well for us for a year and a half. I honestly, I think Oliver Callan once said there's loads of jobs in Ireland. It's just that Nora Casey has them all. I was
You were being
absolutely
greedy. You were making you.
run ragged at doing all this stuff, but I needed to work all that out of my
Yeah, yeah,
system.
yeah, yeah. You
So
had.
I'm coming out of News Talk at the time, and I agreed to do a Sunday show, which is called Mind Feed, which I love doing. And I eased off on everything. I just did one season of the Today program. I realized that was probably too difficult for me to do. I'd left Dragon's Den, and I probably was still doing the takeover. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write. I write when I feel distressed and to get rid of my if I feel very strong emotions like I did after Richard died, I tend to write. It's my default position. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'd
yeah.
already filled
You do
screens
a
and
lot of
screens.
travel writing.
Yeah, but I'd filled screens and screens and screens of writing about the experience of Richard dying and um, just how did I get out of that? It was kind of this feeling that, oh my goodness, here I am coming out the other side, beginning to feel, of course, my personal life is a wreck, but I have all of this amazing new chapter in my life, which I never asked for and I wouldn't have wanted. But I do have it, and it saved me. In a way, it wasn't really about the stages of grief that saved me. That
Yeah,
always really bothered me, that people were asking me, was I in denial or was I in anger or was I in this or that? And in fact, what saved me was this abject terror and fear that I faced in TV3 that carried me over the line into this new zone in my life, which I never would have discovered. So for all the wrong reasons, and I had a very strong moral imprimatur inside me that said, for all the Richards who died too young, who don't get to live their
do
life to the
this. You were
full.
living. You, yeah,
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 all the
yeah.
people in hospices that won't get to, people with
Yeah,
ability
yeah.
issues.
I can understand
Um,
that.
their mothers who, unlike me, I of course worry about Dara's exams in UCD, and they're worried about getting clean food and water for their children every day in Sierra Leone. So I recognised the fact that if I was going to really live the next bit of my life, I had to do things totally differently, and that firstly, let me explain to those people who are in the same position as me almost, how did I get out of it? What might help you to get out of it? Um, and the book was really that. It was really trying to use science to describe, of course my heart was broken, but not my literal heart, because that just pumps blood around my body. It was my brain that was broken, as in there was no sparks flying off in there anymore. I felt like, I never wanted to get off the couch. So how do you convince somebody who's going through that level of grief with
Yeah,
disinterest in the whole of the world and life to get interested again? And I think I found a way. And that inspired me to write the book and to do the TED talk on the grief thing.
yeah,
And I shared my story inadvertently with Marion Finucane. Never planned it. I was only 8 or 9 months after Richard died. She was interviewing me on her show, and it was a profile piece. I just, a girl growing up in the Phoenix Park ends up in Dragon's Den kind of thing. And she knew Richard from the BBC, and so we were in the middle of the interview, and she said, and of course, your husband passed away recently. And we got into this without me being prepared already. And before I know it, I'm like physically by his bedside holding his hand while he's dying in my head
In
and
your head, yeah.
incapable of talking without my voice breaking. And I felt ashamed of myself. We got to the ad break and I said, I'm going to have to go. I was visibly upset at that point, and she was too, by the way. And I ran out of that studio, got into the car. I was talking to my mother on the phone, saying, I've just made a show of myself. Cried on national radio. I mean, I've just absolutely made a show of myself. And the producer was knocking on the window, and he said, look, I'm so sorry. I'm Marion, sorry, and I hope you're okay. And I said, I'm okay. And he said, for what it's worth, there are hundreds of people calling in saying they recognize, themselves in you and what you said.
Yeah.
And there was a small growing comfort in that if you show your vulnerability, like, I mean, what's grief? Everyone
But I
gets it.
think I think we're living in a society today anyway that likes and praises people showing their vulnerability.
Has to
Because,
make, yeah,
there's
it's very
too many
important.
people, trying to have this stiff upper lip and thinking that they're going to embarrass people by getting upset. And, you know, it's an admirable trait when somebody can actually come on like you and just tell their story, because there's thousands in the same boat who probably aren't as articulate as you to actually say it.
Thank you.
But Norah, tell us a little bit about Dragon's Den.
I love Dragon's Den, and more importantly, I loved all the guys. That I was the rare female dragon, and I got some really good investments and some really terrible investments. So some of them I would have had more fun putting my money down the toilet, but I do have a great one.
That's you on
Yeah,
Dragon's
oh my
Den.
God, I hardly recognize myself sometimes when I look back. I still look a bit like that, I guess.
You haven't changed a bit.
Thank you.
The hair is longer now.
Lockdown hair.
Yeah, and mine is tied back.
Um, I think the best investment definitely was understairs storage. He's an amazing guy, still, working away there, Paul Jacob, and he designed this understairs storage space thing, and as in lockdown has developed the 60-second chair, which you can pop, a 60-second desk, which you can pop up and use and back onto the bed or whatever. He's just very inventive, and he's making more now in a week than he was doing in a year. When I invest in him, and he stayed true to his business. He's a great guy. I loved it. I mean, people, I think at home were like, what's she doing on TV? Well, I lived my whole life on TV up to that point. It's just
Yeah.
no one in Ireland knew that. It's just funny. You can be on the BBC all day, every day, or ITV, and people don't really see you as somebody who's on TV. So it was less about being on TV, but more about I was keen to invest. I would have probably stayed in the safe zone of media and magazines and that sort of area had I been left to my own devices. I'm sitting in Dragon's Den listening to all kinds of different businesses, getting interested and excited, and that was what was lovely for me. By the time I came out of Dragon's Den and started doing the takeover, I was building up a hugely vibrant business clinic, meeting loads of businesses. And I think I'm writing a book on startup success at the moment, and I tried to work backwards to see how many businesses have I actually connected with, strategized with, given advice to. It must be over 1,000.
Yeah.
Because I had a very busy business clinic, and I used to take appointments from 8:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. They got 30 minutes each, and if it was worth it, they came back for an hour. Or
There's not enough hours in the day for Norah Casey. There truly isn't. But did you ever think that there were ever mistakes made on Dragon's Den? Because I'm thinking, I was looking accidentally, I saw a guy on LinkedIn in England who was talking about when he and a friend of his decided to pitch their business in the UK for they were looking for 100,000 for 20% investment in their company. and their company was a beer company, and they got as far as the judges and the producers said no, it's not going to work, and they never got to actually pitching, and he said that 100,000 now would have been worth 600,000
There's very few
pounds,
of them though,
six hundred
Mary.
thousand pounds for the 20%.
Very few of them now that
100,000 or
uh,
six, so, yeah, something like that.
would reach those meteoric levels. You have to remember that Dragon's Den's an entertainment show.
Yeah.
There's a business element to it. It survives because people sitting in the armchair are saying, "Oh, I could do that," or "That's so stupid. Don't invest in that." They're the armchair kind of entrepreneur in all of us, and it is very entertaining for something that's
No, I just loved
businessy.
watching it. I'm not a
Yeah, it's
businessy.
brilliant. But
Yeah.
there's an element of some of them come in because they're flamboyant or because they're crazy. It'd be boring if everybody was a solid business coming through the door. And then
And
some
then you buy
people,
into people sometimes.
a lot of people, not just some people, a lot of people just push to go into Dragon's Den because they want the publicity. They don't want the investment at all. They just want that moment on the TV, and you only get the moment on TV if you get investment. If nobody invests in you, you're a fleeting image. You're just shown going in and out, or 10 seconds. So if you get investment, and better still, if the dragons are all fighting over you, you get all the publicity you want. And the really wise ones then afterwards say, "Thanks very much. I don't want your investment. I've got all the publicity I need," and go
Really
on their
gave me
merry
the
way. Yeah.
publicity.
I mean, I think the reality for most people, especially in a market as small as Ireland is, you very rarely get the understair storage. I mean, we fought tooth and nail. Myself and Bobby and Sean O'Sullivan fought like dogs over, the understair storage one, because here was a man who was already doing a significant amount in turnover, and he was, he's an engineer, married to another engineer, like an amazing backstory. I just knew he was the best thing that ever walked in. And Gavin Duffy whispered to me, because he'd already invested a truckload of stuff in that series, was the very last guy who came in on the very last day. And he said, "We never get people like this. Grab him." So I did. I got him. Yeah, but you don't always get that.
And tell me, Nora, about your house, winning house,
That's
celebrity
unlikely.
house of the year. Celebrity house of the year.
My house is beautiful, but I wouldn't say it's huge or glamorous.
It doesn't
I
have to be huge. There we go. There's a
my
photograph of your
Oh
Nora's house.
yeah, yeah. And the three ladies are still there. That Coco Chanel is by the same artist actually, up there. And there's some dogs you can see. This is Colin Farrell's brother's husband, who did these dogs here. They're amazing. They're going.
Fabulous. A little
They're,
bulldog, is it? A little
there's
French
three
bulldog.
of them. I don't know if you can see them, and I bought them as a collection to go for Dara's room. So they're going up now shortly. We just had the painters in yesterday. So I'll tell you the firstly, I'm not really somebody who shares a lot about what goes on in my private life. So it was quite a big thing, but it was raising funds for a charity, and mine went to Focus Ireland. So I liked the idea of my home raising funds for homelessness.
Someone else's home.
And
Yeah.
I also kind of had a sense of a bit of an emotional journey with the house, because we moved in here just before Richard got sick. And all of my memories were of him being sick. I couldn't look at the patio without remembering him and I coming in exhausted from James's and sitting out there having a cup of tea. I couldn't lie in my bed without remembering him struggling to breathe next to me. Everything that's supposed to be a sanctuary about your house was not a sanctuary for me. But at the same time, Dara was very wedded to the house and couldn't let go of it. I mean, his horror would be that if we ever move out of the house. In
Yeah.
practical terms, there's only really two bedrooms. There's Dara's bedroom and mine, and there's the office here and a big open plan area and some courtyards. So I just took a decision on it was around about his second anniversary. I had come across a wonderful woman called Sasha Sykes in the National Gallery, and she makes like hedgerows inside perspex. So she makes these beautiful pieces where she brings the outside into the house. And I said, if I'm going to make this house feel good, I need to bring in some art. I love art. So
Yeah.
obviously I wish you could see the rest of it. My house is festooned in art. I have a basement full of it. But I said, I want to look at beautiful things. I don't have to have a big house, but I want everything to be beautiful. So I called her and I said, listen, you've never met me. You don't even know who I am. I just saw your work and I thought it was amazing. And I wondered if you could do some pieces for me. And it was a long journey. She was pregnant in the middle of that. I think it took almost 2 years. And she made me the beautiful white rose table, which was emblematic of the white
Gorgeous.
roses of my bridal bouquet. And then she made this beautiful, I don't know if you can see it, but this beautiful piece behind took 2 years. It's resin and it has real rose petals going up the side of it. It's a table behind. And this peony, I love Bird of Paradise. So she used that for a Chinese lacquer cabinet with real
Peonies are
peonies in
beautiful,
it.
aren't they?
Yeah. So lavender, big lavender cubes instead of bedside lockers. And so she was bringing all this amazing art together. And I thought, okay, the house it needs more than that. And everything in the house had changed to white in the bedroom. The bedroom was quite oak, and I want everything white, white. So that made a
A
huge
very
difference.
gallery look.
A woman whose husband passed away a few months before me had taken to having coffee with me. A lovely woman. We met in James's, and she said, "You know what you need to do is change the bed." And to me, that was like, oh my God, it almost felt the most disloyal thing on the planet.
Yeah.
You have to remember the time I was plugging in Richard's mobile every evening on his bedside locker, and his books were still piled on that locker on that side of the bed. And his stuff I still have, obviously a lot of stuff belonging to Richard in the basement, beautiful shirts that he loved. I'm going to make into a patchwork quilt. But it was quite a big decision. So I said, okay, I knew more about beds then for about 4 weeks because I didn't realize it was very complicated to buy a bed. But I bought a new bed and that did make a huge difference. She was absolutely right. It changed the whole mood of
Yeah.
going to bed at night rather than being terrified. I felt
Bit
better
feng
about it.
shui.
Yeah. And then Aoife Mullane, who that beautiful cushions and my lovely armchairs done, I kind of knew her. Firstly, Amy Huberman had been a fan of hers, and she'd some of her work in a spa called Oslo. And I just thought, why do I have art on the walls and now I've got art in these beautiful tables? I need to have textile art. And
Yeah.
she's definitely the Orla Kiley of our generation, of her generation. She's really artistic.
Yeah.
That what you can't see is that beautiful velvet with bronze and gold shot through it. It's just stunning. So I said to her, Aoife, I'd never met her before. I just called her, I said, Aoife, would you do something for me? She came in, we chatted, and she made that chair into a beautiful, I saw it in Brown Thomas then in the designer pop up, and I was like, oh my God, this is like my chair is famous. But I just love it, that the colors of turquoise and everything.
Yeah.
And so I had,
See,
it
when you have the white walls, Norah, you can use them as a gallery.
yeah,
You have that almost gallery look because your pictures are adding the color.
yeah. And I think there wasn't one part of my house that didn't have lavish love and attention, as in I went around every corner of the house and said, what can I do to make this look better? What art can I bring in to make this look beautiful? I'm quite a minimalist person. I'm also
Yeah.
total Monica. My house has to be beautiful all day, every day. I just can't stand not walking into my bathroom and feeling like I'm walking into the best hotel on the planet. So although
You
it's
wouldn't
not
walk
big,
into mine, so.
it was very beautiful. Architecturally, it had been done beautifully anyway. And I think when the judges came to visit me, of course, I was thinking like, there's no way that I'm not even going to get in the running, because like some of my fellow dragons live in huge mansions, and I don't live like that. I live very simply, but I think that they loved the emotional
Simplicity.
journey that I had, that I was kind of, on this wonderful kind of journey of going from a difficult relationship with a house to absolutely falling in love with it again, which I have, of course.
But as well as that, you were making a small space. You were filling the small space with love.
Yeah,
You were
yeah,
actually,
exactly.
yeah,
It was,
you can have
and
a
it
big
was very
space.
much a journey of love.
Mhm.
And I think anyone who, like, mine is a small house. It's not a big house, but it does. I think it does works for me because there's so much art,
So what
and
do you want? You just want a room to sleep in, and a place to work in,
exactly.
and a space you can call home.
Yeah, place you can call home is the most important thing, and it's very much our home now. So, yeah, definitely.
And I suppose Nora Casey, the dancer.
Oh, the dancer. Yeah, I loved that now. It was really nice, and it was like something I'd never imagined I'd do in my life, and I really loved it. I got Curtis Pritchard, who went on to do Love Island, so he was a great partner. for dancing, and
Or
it
in the
was just
background.
a magical few. You know, that's lovely, Mary. It takes me back. It was a magical interlude in my life, which was just right at the time. I just sold a chunk of my business to an American company. I had this lovely moment when I felt I could take some time out to do some dancing. And sorry, Mary, I'm I know. Sorry. I don't know if you can edit that out.
They're
That's
all
my
the
son.
natural moments of life on
Yeah,
lockdown.
I think
That's Dara.
that's Dara. Yeah, he's used to me being on my headphones and earsets, but it's usually just a Zoom call. So
What was I going to say? You were a natural waltzer. You were a natural uh, waltzer. I thought. Do you know?
yeah, I loved waltzing. I did love the faster dances too. I just had
Yeah,
my knee done.
the
Um,
passo was. I liked your passo too.
yeah, it was very much an empowered woman dance. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You had
Um,
attitude.
and of course, we're in practice now for comic relief, and it's been nice to actually learn the steps. Um, Again, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what's new for Norah? What's new on your horizon?
Well, I have
What
a,
do you? I know you've got many doctorates,
yeah, no, just
and you got a fellowship from the Royal College of
I did, yeah,
Surgeons.
yeah.
So
I think that I uh, I think well, what's new is I'm just about to finish a chapter on my book. I've got a big deadline looming today, so straight away now, I think I'm coming up to my writing time. Just coming up now, I'm going to start writing again. I have 3 books on the go, so I have to get them finished. It's been good in the lockdown, focusing on Woman's Way. It's my last remaining magazine, and for some reason, just absolutely shot through the roof in cover sales. We had Nevin Maguire on one, Dermot Bannon, Francis Brennan. I think Nathan Carter's on next week. Mary O'Rourke is on this week. Just the right kind of champions of women in Ireland to go on the cover. And because Woman's Way is about knitting and crafts and, mindfulness and all of those things, it just so happened that that was perfect. A lot of magazines stopped publishing, a lot of newspapers really struggled. I think that we're probably going to be the last man standing or woman standing in terms of magazine sales. Our sales are up over 30%. We went through the
uh,
roof, and we were so worried about having an audience that would predominantly probably be older and likely cocooners, but actually went through the roof. And we'd always done home baking and
yeah,
things that people were turning to, so in a way there was like this, oh, the whole world is now our readers, not just one section of
and you've got a
society.
captive
So
audience as well now because people are in lockdown.
yeah,
So
exactly,
they're
yeah, yeah,
reading
yeah,
more
yeah,
than they probably would be when they were out. But
yeah.
tell me a little bit before we finish about I'm giving one night to change a lifetime.
That's with Focus Ireland. I've been doing that for a long time with Sister Stan. Big fan of hers. I
It's
went to school
amazing.
in amazing. I went to school in Stanhope Street, and of course she's at the back of that. Um, I think myself, as a business person, I felt the business community could do so much more, and it started off. In fact, you have a photo behind you with Anne O'Leary and Louise Phelan from Anne, of course, is Vodafone, and Louise has now left. But that was the first night in Christchurch, I think, that I did. It was freezing cold, lashing rain, but it was a
You
way
look
the business,
frozen in it.
yeah, it was a way the business community kind of, and then we've moved now to down to much more palatial, but still outdoors and everything else. But it's less. Christchurch is very loud, and you can, if it isn't the bins or the Garda sirens, it's the homelessness themselves coming to heckle us for daring to try and pretend we were going to be homeless for a night. But it's just one thing that doesn't let you understand what homelessness is about. But when you face your bed the next day after a night sleeping rough, you do get a sense of,
Appreciate it
oh
as
my
well.
goodness, if you were doing this night in, night out, you'd really understand it. Increasingly, my focus and their focus too is on homeless families and children, not traditional rough sleepers, as it were. That's always an issue in terms of emergency accommodation. But people who fall into homelessness through rent and through difficulty, adversity, a lot of women in domestic violence in that situation as well. So I don't just do that. Like on Women's Day, on International Women's Day, last year I said, you know, the business community can all talk to each other because you do that all day every day 365 days of the year, but on International Women's Day we should be reaching out to women who are in homelessness.
Yeah,
And I do a
yeah.
lot with I try and do a lot with Docus, the women's prison, so they
Yeah.
all came to that event. The Lord Mayor
Oh,
gave us
that
a
must be
mansion rent free.
fascinating.
mm.
Yeah, that must be
So
fascinating. But Norah, I suppose, oh, you've been absolutely amazing today. I mean, you've been so
thank
giving of
you.
your time. But I suppose the one question, I know you've been asked it before and you've hedged it many times, I think. Have you ever thought of putting yourself forward for the Oris itself? I know you know
Ars and
you I
Uachtaráin.
know I know you have said that your own house is the greatest house there is. But would
I
you
think,
ever
Mary,
consider
that
going for the presidency of Ireland?
the so the honest truth about politics, let's say generally, is I'm a very political person, but I've never joined a political party. I
Yeah,
was very political in London. I was a member of all sorts of different committees in the House of Commons. It was like my second home. I'm very political here, as in, I understand and want to work and engage within politics. But
yeah,
the idea of being a politician, oh my goodness,
would kill you.
that, oh, listen, look, in my small way, as a private individual, I can independently do far more.
Yeah,
If I
that's
if
true.
I
That's very
find
true.
if I find an area I want to focus on, oh boy, will it get my focus and attention. I can actually do far more with me, myself, and I, without anyone telling me what my opinions and views are. Or I would really be suspicious of myself as a politician as to why I had taken various decisions. At least I know that I'm true to my heart now and that I
Yeah,
make decisions and that my opinions are heartfelt. They're not ones that I've manufactured because somebody needs to vote for me. Um, and I also think that my life has been pretty turbulent up until now. And I like the fact that I'm here with Dara and, we're very contented. I'm very contented in my life. I don't like making big decisions about my future because I've just learned
your future happens
from
as it
life.
happens.
I've learned that life has curveballs for me, and there's no point in me planning or making decisions at this very moment in
You
time.
go with the flow.
I have not enough hours in the day to do all the fabulous things I want to do. I don't even see it as to-do
Think
lists.
of how gloriously you could be decorating the Oris.
Oh yeah, one room at a time, and they'd never see me.
Dara would never see you. No one would see you.
Exactly.
Well,
Thanks, Mary.
Nora, you've been a joy, honestly, an absolute joy. What started off, I was never been so nervous. I said doing my Viva for my PhD wasn't half as nervous as,
Stop.
and then we had a few technical glitches at the start with my microphone, but all went well, and it was an absolute joy to have you on. And I wish you huge success in everything you do because you
Thank you.
certainly deserve it.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Mary. Best of luck.
You too. God
Take
bless
care.
you.
Bye bye
Bye
bye.
bye.